Welcome. So I wanted to prepare a presentation about analytics. Something I like to do with the team in New York, I'll read a book and then I'll try and describe it to the team, and I'll do a presentation about it. If someone else reads something that's really interesting and useful, they would present about it too. So this is an adapted presentation I did in New York. And the goal is to talk about how to use data for new products. And it's based on this book called Lean Analytics. Does anyone know what lean, like lean startup, lean manufacturing? Nobody's heard of this? Okay, so lean is sort of broadly a strategy for new companies, but also new product development. And I read several of these books. It's really great. It's a good strategy for building new products. So this is about lean analytics. Has anyone seen Field of Dreams? Now, this is an American movie about a guy who makes a baseball field. But there's this classic line, if you build it, they will come. But it basically doesn't work. Because this concept is you just sell what you can make. I could make a baseball field, people will come. And the concept thing is you have to make what people want. So you have to figure out what people want and then make that. So this lean process is what helps you discover what sells. It helps you discover what people want. When you're doing any new product development, you have to recognize that you don't actually know what you're building until you build it. So lean is this iterative process that leads to successful new products. Generally is drawn in some sort of cycle like this. You have an idea, you build something, you release something, you measure, you get some data back, you learn, and then that gives you new ideas, you build something new, you keep releasing and improving. Unfortunately, we're not really good at being honest about that learning section. What we tend to say is our idea is the best. Building stuff is fun. Who has time to measure things? No data, you end up not learning anything. Just short circuits this loop, and you just end up building products that no one wants. So this is what analytics and lean analytics is all about, is trying to help with that process. So analytics is the measurement of the movement of your business towards whatever those goals, that product goals. One note the book makes is our intuition is not great with statistics. I don't know if anyone knows this. So I have two kids. This is not me specifically, but in general, if you were to say, I have two kids, at least one of them is a girl. What are the chances that the other is a boy?
50-50.
If you say 50%, you'd be wrong. Because the real way you describe this problem is, well, I have two kids. These are the options. It's either a boy-boy, boy-girl, girl-boy, or girl-girl. Because the order could be either. And it's not a boy-boy because you have at least one girl. So the actual math is that it's 2 out of 3, or 66% chance that the other one would be a boy. So since statistics are not intuitive, we need to rely on math. So here are some things. A good metric is understandable. It is comparative. So understandable, this is a common thing that you run into when you're coming up with a metric. You could come up with a really interesting complicated thing that takes all these, a model basically, or some sort of machine learning thing. But if you can't really explain it, it's hard to use. So you want to be understandable, comparative, meaning that you can compare it in different situations. You can compare versions of it. A ratio or a rate. So as opposed to a number like, on 100 kilometers, you would say, 100 kilometers per hour. That is a more useful metric if it's a ratio or rate generally. and most critical, it will change your behavior. Whatever metric you choose has to actually be useful. You'd have to say, well, if it's lower than this, then I'll do this. If it's higher than this, then I'll do that. If it doesn't change your behavior, it's not a good metric. There's a concept called vanity metrics. So these are numbers or stats that look good on paper but don't really mean anything important. Some examples of this might be total installs of an app. Total installs, it's great, you can look good, but if you've been running, let's assume you have 1 million total installs. That sounds great, maybe, but if your app's been running for 10 years, is 1 million installs good? If you got all your installs on the first day and you've never gotten another install since then, is it good? What does that mean? Total installs is not great. Total revenue, there are millions of these, like tweets that mention your product. So generally, the metric won't change how you behave. It is a bad metric. So you want to be choosing metrics that are useful. I'm going to describe a whole bunch of terms. So when we're talking about analytics, you should be thinking about these terms. You're going to hear these terms a lot. So I'm going to describe them. Qualitative versus quantitative. People know about this? So qualitative are unstructured, anecdotal. They can be useful, but quantitative are numbers or stats. It's like a numerical value. It's sort of like analog versus digital stats. Exploratory versus reporting analytics. Exploratory tend to be like one-off research things that might demonstrate some unique and interesting insight, but they're kind of hard to get at. They can be super cool. But reporting kinds of statistics are predictable. You can just get these every day, and you can look at trends in reporting statistics. They're useful for managing operations. They're necessary. Leading and lagging analytics. You guys ever heard this? Leading and lagging indicators. Okay, so a lagging indicator lagging means like slow and like sort of delayed. It basically means it's something that is showing you historically how you did. So sales, would be a lagging indicator. Sales being completed sales that you've delivered the product. It's a perfectly good metric, but it's lagging. It tends to be the end of a cycle. A leading indicator is forward-looking, so it's some sort of number that might be predictive of where you're going in the future. So it might be like new opportunities or new installs. It might be a leading indicator of engagement moving forward. So leading and lagging. Correlated versus causal. Causal, like being the cause. So correlated, two variables that are related, but might be dependent on something else. They clearly move, they're synchronized, but they might not actually relate to each other. Causal are independent variables where one directly impacts the other. Here's a classic example of this. These are two lines. I don't know if it's true. This is accurate, but this is ice cream consumption up here and drowning. So it would imply that if you have kids, you do not give them ice cream because they might drown.
That's a very good case of false correlation.
Yeah.
My favorite example is another. Over the course of the last 2 centuries, the global warming is on the rise, while the number of pirates is declining.
Pirates down, heat up. So this is like a classic thing. So here you'd say the correlated metrics, ice cream and drowning are definitely correlated. They move in synchrony, but they're not causal. It's actually summertime or maybe swimming, hot weather and drowning maybe are more causal. If you had a weird day where it happened to be really hot, your drowning might spike because more people might go to the beach or whatever on that day. So understanding what is correlated and what is causal is really important for analytics. So in general, when you get a quantitative leading causal metric is a superpower. It's very powerful if you know, with your product, you know that there's some examples like in Facebook, they knew if you could get 10 friends on your first day, I think you could get something like 10 friends or 7 friends, you were very likely to become a repeat user and stay for years and be like really valuable. And so they worked very hard to, on your first day, keep you there, get you to invite friends, remind you to do that, because that was a leading indicator, because it's an indicator of future engagements. It's a causal indicator, because when you have 7 friends, that actually causes you to engage more because Facebook is useful. And it's quantitative because it's a strict number that you could measure. So anytime we're dealing with a product, we should be thinking about our quantitative metrics, our leading metrics, and our causal metrics especially. Any questions about any of those terms?
No, it's like a theory and practice how to impact on our work. I made about some example maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit later.
Well, I think in the next meeting later today, I'll take this stuff that you're learning here, which I think of as more of a framework, and we'll talk specifically about arena games and factives and the kinds of metrics we care about for those products. So lean frameworks, path to successful products. So there are lots of examples of these lean frameworks. So you have the cycle that's happening where you are making a minimum viable product. You're testing it, you're getting data, you're making changes. So there's that cycle. But while that cycle's happening, your product exists somewhere in this flow from being something that people are, something that you're trying to understand how sticky it is, meaning how much people engage with it, how viral, how much people talk about it and tell their friends. And then at some points when you have something that's sticky and viral, you'd be worrying about price. This is like one example. This is called Eric's 3 engines of growth. Your approach, you keep people coming back. You then make them invite their friends. You measure how many friends they invite. And then figure out how it monetizes. How much are people willing to pay? There's another version of this. I just think it's funny. It's Dave's pirate metrics. R, because it's acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, referral. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but generally the concept is here. You have to figure out how to acquire users. You figure out how to retain them. Then you figure out how do you generate revenue from them. The lean analytics is again from the book. The 5 stages look like this. Empathy, which is, have you found a real need that people in the market face, a real problem that people are dealing with, something they actually care about. Stickiness, so once you figure out that you do have a need, then you move down to stickiness. You say, like, does my product actually solve their problem? Do people like my product enough they keep using it? Virality is figure out if there are ways to get them to tell their friends. Our products we really don't have a big viral component, but only after you figured out that this is a product that people like, a problem that people have, and my product will actually engage them and help them solve this problem, then you can get to the idea of how much can you actually make money from this product. And then scale, I have found a sustainable, scalable business. So then once you figure out how to make money, then you figure out how to scale up and do it more, make more money from it. In the book, it's like super detailed about different business types. So like e-commerce, SaaS, marketplaces, media. It's not super important. Generally, the thing that is interesting, so you can say like, okay, so you've got this flow. What stage is your new product at? Is it like really early where you're just still trying to prove that this is a problem that people really have? And then you'd say, well, as a media company, there's one metric that matters.
Just one?
Yeah, just one. So,
Which one?
well, that's for you to figure out. He basically lays out what the metric is at each of. We'll get into it, but I won't go into it super deeply. But the concept is, anytime you have a product, you should be focused on one main metric at a time. Doesn't mean you're only focused on that forever. It's just, it's hard to achieve focus when you're working on a product at all. So this one metric will help you like really hone in on what you care about. The other thing he brings up is the idea that metrics are like squeeze toys. I'm not 100% sure about that, but the concept here is that if you're focusing on something like miles per hour, right? We talked about that as an example, or kilometers per hour for your car. Let's assume that's the metric that's the most important, and you're trying to figure out how to make a product that goes as fast as possible, and you're tinkering with it. By focusing on that, something else will become really obvious. Once you squeeze that, something else will sort of pop out, and then you can move over to that metric next. So let's assume like fuel consumption becomes really noticeable as like the next thing I need to focus on. Okay, I've got an engine that's super fast, but now it is pretty expensive to run. So like maybe now I'll focus on trying to lower the gallons or liters of fuel per hour. So as I said, like he actually does break down like exactly what metrics he thinks are important if you're in a revenue stage for a two-sided market. The book has a lot of reference. You know, if you just are interested in having it around, you could look at it. But in general, you want to focus on a single metric for a product at any time. And this is kind of an aside, and just an interesting example from the book. Do you guys know what Nigerian spam is? Oh. You do?
I received it.
You have received Nigerian spam? This is a really common kind of fake email you get. And it says, I am a Nigerian prince who is trying, I have a huge amount of money, and I'm trying to get it out of my country. Let me send it to you, but I would like to send you all this money. But I just need like $100 to like fill out some paperwork, and then I'll give you all this money, something like that. And this is a joke from like, it's not a joke, it's like a real thing. And so these people all over the world will send spam emails to millions of people, and some small number of people will respond back and say like, well, that sounds interesting. I would like millions of dollars. Where can I send my check? So when you think about this, what is the metric that they care about? And what these guys are talking about is that Nigerian spam is consistently totally obvious. I mean, one, it says like, I'm a Nigerian prince. It's like full of spelling errors. They're just like ridiculous emails.
That's actually a very, very good calculation.
Exactly.
I just know what you're going to say next.
Yeah. So imagine that they send out emails. Sending out emails is very, very cheap. They just send out lots of emails to all kinds of random addresses. They have a response. If they have bad language, meaning just like, it's like obviously a scam, they will get a very low response rate. Let's assume they get 1 to 2 responses. They then have to write an email back and say like, okay, you can send it to this thing or answer some questions or whatever. They start engaging with that person, and then now, according to this, 70% of the time, the people who respond to that will actually give them money. Think about this compared to the opposite way. If they were to improve their language, they'd get about a 10% response rate. Make it trickier, say, I am your credit card agency and need you to send this one document. They might get 100 responses, but it is likely they will get, they'll still only get one person because a lot of those will just fail. So you have a lower conversion rate. So which one of these do you think they should focus on? The conversion of emails or the response rate?
I'm going for response rate.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
No, yes, it's so obvious. They should focus on the one metric that matters, which is conversion. And this is clearly why, the fact that they have such a terrible response rate is actually a bonus. They really care about this conversion rate because they have to respond to these emails, And so if they had to respond to 100 emails and start up a conversation with all these old people throughout the world and convince them to send some money, it would actually be a really bad use of their time. So they actually use this like poor language and like total obviousness to mean that the only people who respond are people who are just ridiculously gullible. So it's an advantage. So Nigerian spammers understand their business. They focus on the right metric, and they focus on not. They don't get sidetracked by vanity metrics or metrics that aren't super useful. So after you've chosen your metric, you want to draw a line in the sand. You ever heard the phrase "draw a line in the sand"? Oh, okay. This is a common phrase in America. It's like, but it's pretty obvious, right? Like you have sand, you draw a line. Generally, you're trying to reach that line, or you say, "Don't cross this line." I don't know. I've seen it a couple different ways.
Red line maybe,
Yeah. Draw a line in the sand. But the main point is you just want to choose a number that you're trying to hit with your metric. And here's some examples that you guys should be aware of. So it could be the minimum that would allow a product to work. Are you guys aware? What is 5% VCTR? Are you guys aware of this number?
Maybe from Facebook? No?
No, this is in Habit. This is what we're trying to achieve with the lineup picker. So lineup picker needs to hit this number, 5% viewable click-through rate. Because we have measured, Rob has done a model that says this is the lowest, this is sort of the lowest number that would, where all of our math works out, and if we could sell branded factives and generally get something like 5% viewable click-through rate, we can make a good profit. So that's sort of that, hopefully we've seen this factive do 14%. That's totally great. But like, instead of just saying, let's find out what viewable click-through rate we can get, we draw a line in the sand and say 5%. We want to be beyond 5%. And I'm pretty confident we'll hit that, but that'll be fun. So it could be an industry standard. This just happens to be the banner ad. I think this is the banner ad industry standard for click-through rate. Or it could be the best value you could imagine hitting. Do you guys remember 90% HTML revenue? This was one of our goals from several.
HTML5 games.
Yeah.
To achieve 90% of revenue from HTML5 games.
This is our Q2, one of our, quarterly goals, maybe a year ago. We were releasing new games and we were trying to hit a 90% revenue. At that time, that was a very hard thing to do. And currently we've hit it, but at the time we failed. But again, these are just examples of you choose a metric and then you just choose a number that you're trying to hit because it helps you sort of understand things. So remember, it's a line in the sand, and so that means you can change it. So if it turns out that we definitely can't hit 90%, we want to make it 85, like later you could change it, but it's important to have a line in the sand. Generally, it's nice when you have a metric that you've chosen to know the industry standards for those metrics. The book has a lot of industry standards. If your product loses 7% of its customers every month, is it good or bad?
I don't know.
But
For me,
how,
it's bad.
it loses 7%.
It loses
But
7%
how
of
many
customers.
does it gain?
That's a good question.
If you look at Majun Dimension Blast, I can say it's good.
You think this is good? Yeah, so this concept is called churn. So it's like churn anytime you have what's called a SaaS product or people are very focused on their churn rate. So it's like a little bad. Generally, the best products have about a 1.5 or a 3% churn rate. You really would, if we were to draw a line in the sand on a churn rate for a product, we really wanted to hit it. Generally, you want to get below 5% at least, and around 2% would be really great. So baselines for visitor engagement might be something like 10%. There's a lot of other examples, but just a general practice is when you're choosing a metric, figure out what it is. So here's an example of the lean analytics cycle in action. So pick a KPI. draw a line in the sand, decide how you want to change that metric, come up with some sort of hypothesis, make a test, measure results, success, and cycle. And then there's this concept of pivot or give up if this didn't move the needle. This is from Airbnb. Hosts get more business if their property is professionally photographed. Do you guys have Airbnb?
Yes.
Yeah. So Airbnb had a hypothesis that, like, it's interesting I didn't write down their key metric, but I think their key metric was bookings, or it was like bookings per view of the page. So how many different places does someone have to look at before they click yes, like book that? So that was like the number they were interested in. And they generally had this gut instinct that photographs that looked a little better got more click-through, more bookings per view. So they made an MVP, which was they just hired 20 people to take pictures. They would just offer, hey, we'll take pictures for you. And then they measured the results. So they compared the photographs, the professionally photographed listings to normal control listings to look at the click-through rate, and they made a decision. Ultimately, they launched it broadly. It was hugely successful and part of their rise to prominence. So now they have like 5,000 shoots per month. Wow, a little while ago.
This apartment. It's abstract.
It's just abstract, but I think this is just an example of saying, like, before it was just someone shot it, you see it like looks dark and like fine, and this is like a professionally shot version of it. And in general, they had a lot more people hit a booking or whatever when it looked nice like that. It looks like a bigger space. The light looks a lot better. So it was really valuable for them. So one question, gut instinct? Seriously? I thought this is all about analytics. Well, I think the concept here is that often, when you're looking for a potential improvement, if you don't have data to go on, you just have to make a good guess. If data, then maybe you can use like a computer. So without data, you'd say, gee, those houses look pretty nice. Maybe it's the camera. Maybe we should do something to improve the quality of those pictures. If you did have data, you could say, hey, tell me what the highly rented houses have in common. And if you had the data, you could actually research it. It didn't have to be a gut instinct. So wrap up. So these are the stages of a lean product. Generally, you figure out what stage you're in, pick a metric, draw a line in the sand, build and test features, measure results, and learn. And by doing this cycle, you'll slowly move down here to a point where you can actually reach scale and have revenue and have all the good stuff that come with a good product. Any questions?
Why this cycle started from some idea? In first slide, we saw the cycle with we have idea, we start to create something, analyze it, yes. Why we can't, after idea, learn, or yes, why we can't learn some data, probably it already exists, before starting building?
Sometimes, I think that a lot of the philosophy behind like lean is it's about new product development. If you're making something that someone else has already made, then probably you just go online and you find out how to make it, or you talk to somebody who's done it, or you look at the research and you replicate it. But the concept of lean is you're making something totally new, like in Habit, what you very often can't just look it up, have an idea, learn, have an idea and learn. You have to build something to actually learn.
Prototypes and everything.
Yeah, you have to prototype something because it's the only way to learn about something that's like totally new. But certainly, as you're coming up with ideas, if it turns out that someone's already solved it, then you shouldn't build it. Any other questions?
I'm waiting for practice, maybe.
For which?
For practice. Next part of
Yeah.
presentation.
Okay. Cool. Well, I'll let that sink in.
It's pretty clear and pretty obvious, about. Maybe question is how to define this line for project. It's super visual, yeah. For example, why Rob find out 5% for click-through rate? But
Sure.
Because we grabbed analytics and we look at a lot of factors, try to understand which factor has good ideas, which factors has not good ideas, something like this, yeah?
Well, so we certainly did. We had built a bunch of factors, so we knew what was possible within the viewable click-through rate range, and that was pretty important for us, even to feel like we could make money from Inhabit. But the way he actually came up with his number is he built a big mathematical model, and he said it's a big Excel spreadsheet, and it says if we charge this much to the brand, and they give us this much per engagement, and we get I just like basically walk down all the whole pieces, and then we buy the spaces for this amount, and then we get this % click-through rate. How much ultimate profit would we make? We split a % with these. We pay this much to build the factive. What is our % profit? And I think it was something like 20% when he put in a number like 5. So given everything, it would be likely that we'd be profitable if our factives were hitting 5% viewable click-through rate. So it's based on math, basically.
So it's kind of a reverse finding.
Yeah.
We figured out that we will only reach break-even point 5%.
Right. Yeah, that's it. I mean, so it's actually above break-even point. I'm not, he didn't do it to the core, but I think what he did was he said, do you know the term opportunity cost? Opportunity cost is a great term to know. It basically means what are the opportunities I'm giving up by doing this? So he says, I think he said like 10%. If we just took money and invested it in the market, how much additional money would that make? And then you'd say, well, if making Inhabit makes less than the opportunity of just putting your money in the bank, then we shouldn't be making Inhabit. We should just be putting our money in the bank. So there's some profit threshold that we would call the opportunity cost of making this at all. So I think that's where this number comes in. All right, thanks.
Thank you.